Hello, welcome to Human Tech, a podcast about the intersection between humans and technology. My name is Guthrie. I'm here with Susan. Hi, Susan.
Hey, Guthrie.
And I'm putting you in charge of introducing our fabulous guest today.
Yeah, we have a really special guest. This is Dean Barker, and Dean is the Vice President of User Experience for United Health Group, and he leads the Optum Design Studio there at United Health Group. That's one of his many hats that he wears. I'm sure we're going to talk about all the hats. And also, he's a dear, dear friend of both you and I, Guthrie. So, a lot of times when we have guests on, we don't know them. They're new people. This is not one of those times. Dean's an old friend. So, welcome, Dean. You can
Susan,
say hello. Yeah.
Guthrie, hello, welcome. I'm guessing I am the first guest that you've had that actually babysat for Guthrie.
Oh my God. Okay. Yes. That is true.
Is that actually true?
That's
Yes.
actually true. There's a first. Yes.
I
Okay.
don't think we've had anyone else on that's babysat for you.
Well, we've had some people on that you go pretty far
We've
back
had some
with.
people on that I've known for a long time, but not anyone who babysat. Yes, that is absolutely true. So obviously, we go back a long ways. Either that or Guthrie is really young and is not even out of school yet. Yeah, Dean, we've known each other a very, very long time. And we've done all kinds of cool projects together.
Yeah.
I'll just mention a few of them and then you can see if you have any different memories. I mean, we've written a book together.
Mhm.
We've created
I always forget about that one.
Oh, thanks, Guthrie.
In defense, that was a long
It
time
was
ago.
a long time.
What's
ago.
the name of the book?
What's the name
It's
of the book?
designing effective speech interfaces.
That's right. And we've also created a user-centered design process together. Do you remember that?
We did, and we should actually talk about that a little bit.
Yeah.
It was fun. It's funny that you bring that up. I think I mentioned to you that I was putting together my studio just this afternoon. And
Your studio at home, not your...
my home studio.
Yeah.
And so it's one of my hats is as a musician. It's got nothing to do with our field, but so I've got a music studio and home office that I'm just getting set up sort of after some COVID-related remodeling. Anyway, I found this box with all these old tubes of different posters. Yes, you remember the posters?
Posters of our user-centered design process.
I have the Interphase 5 process, and I have the CompuWare processes that preceded it.
Yes.
From when we started working together in
Yes.
the early 90s or whatever it was.
Yeah. How fun is that?
Yeah.
Interface
Amazing.
5. It was a good name.
It was a good name. Yeah, it was
It
a
was.
great it is a great process.
Dean,
Absolutely.
I don't know if you know this. Maybe I told you this at one point, but not super recently, but in the last 2 years, we were going through some of the old files that she had, because we have backups on backups and old hard drives and stuff sitting around, and so we ran into the Interface 5 documentation.
Mm-hmm.
All still works. Because it's it's HTML. Yeah, HTML5.
Oh, wow.
And all the links worked and everything. It was like, look at that.
So you can pop it open even today after 10, 15, 20 years. Open it up in a web browser. Works just fine.
It's all there.
That's amazing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it was a very solid process. And that was sort of in the heyday of the era of what was then user-centered design.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we've talked about reviving it.
Yeah.
I have to tell you, I still get emails from people asking if they haven't asked to buy more posters, but I don't know if you remember, but we used to also provide, it was on HTML, as we mentioned,
Hmm.
and there were posters, but we also had like a binder that I used in the workshops.
Yeah.
And I've had people contact me over the last couple of years and asked, could they buy some more binders? And then I was like, wow, you're still using that? You know, that's pretty amazing, Yeah, that was
I
that
think
was very fun.
I think we should revise it, and then not only
Yeah.
should we do the binders, we should do T-shirts and coffee mugs and bumper stickers, just
I
all the
like it.
merchandising.
All the merch. Get the
That's
merch
right.
going. So, Dean, we've worked together in while we were at various companies. We've kept in touch. We saw you last about a year and a half ago when we came out to speak at the UXPA conference that was in the Phoenix area, and that's where you're located now. And but I do want to, I know we could probably talk for like 5 hours, but we won't do that to people on the podcast. But we will be talking about all kinds of stuff, I'm sure. But before we get into all that, I also, you've got some pretty great credentials too. So can we just mention that, like, you know, degrees and
Oh,
experience and you have this job, VP of user experience for United Health Group and so on, but you also, like, you've been teaching college a little bit
yeah.
in addition. So can you just take a minute and just kind of talk about your creds?
My creds, my bona fides.
Yeah, your
Um,
yeah.
well, I start. It's funny because, of course, back when I was coming up and in the early years, there wasn't really much of a direct route into this field and into this industry. You didn't go to school for it. Like, it sort of amuses me now that there are degrees in user experience. You know what I mean? So when
Yeah, it didn't exist.
what's that?
It didn't exist
It
a
didn't
while
exist.
ago.
No, not at all. And so folks like you, who really were the kind of the foundation of the field, generally came from a cognitive psychology background. And when I came up, I I didn't even start in the industry. For one thing, I started as a musician and went to the conservatory and went to music school and then went on the road. And then when I kind of learned that wasn't much of a way to make a living, I went back to school and got a business degree. And I got involved in computers, primarily from a training perspective. So my kind of proto-professional career was computer training. And then ultimately, when I was living in Minneapolis, I went to the University of Minnesota and got a master's in software engineering. But by that time, I was sort of mid-career already, and ultimately ended up teaching in that program. My mentor at the university had decided to semi-retire, so they asked that I take over the course there. And because my company is headquartered in Minnesota, I'm there quite a bit, at least pre-COVID. So I was actually for a year commuting to teach at the University of Minnesota, and then the subsequent year got a position at ASU and left U of M because of the commuting. It was just a little bit much.
ASU is
Arizona State University, so
yeah.
that's the hometown university here. So similar sort of
Yeah.
thing. I teach in the engineering department, and what I was teaching at Minnesota was called GUI design, and it was basically the UCD process, like we were just talking about. And then the course I teach now is an undergraduate human-computer interaction course, which has been it's been fun, from your teaching experience and training experience and everything else. Just what you get out of teaching is as much the learning process as anything. So for me, it's in part an opportunity to give back. It's in part, given my day job, a opportunity to kind of stay sharp in certain things because, basically now I run a business. That's my day job. It's got less to do with design that I might like. And it's an opportunity to really dig into, the theoretical aspects, right? So I get to read a bunch of articles on signal detection theory and try and teach it, and that helps me just from an intellectual standpoint. And there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff that's kind of a cross-rough that goes back and forth, I think, between the business and teaching. So there will be things, for example, there was some stuff that we were working on in terms of trying to create an effective or emotional design evaluation at work, that then I took some of the stuff that we were talking about and took the background resources and took that list of background resources into a lecture, right? So some of the citations and things like that. So that's one way that the information flows in terms of that relationship between the two. And then other ways, I had been doing some teaching where I was using the cognitive walkthrough method, which is not real well known and it's kind of gotten, lost over the years, but I think is a really strong methodology for, if you will, discount usability engineering, like Nielsen used to talk about. And it's something that seemed to particularly resonate with the engineering students. And so took that into my practice at work, and we started doing it, and it's gone over very well. So I like the relationship between teaching and a professional career, although, it's challenging just in terms of keeping up on all of it, of course.
Yeah. So I don't know how much you can or want to, and if you don't want to, it's fine. But I don't know how much you can or want to talk about, the job of being VP of User Experience for United Health Group. If you can or want to talk about it, I'm just kind of, that's, it's United Health Group is a huge company.
It's yes.
Huge company. And so I would think that, there's just got to be constant challenges and rewards, but also challenges of doing, UX work and of leading UX work at a company of that size. And I don't know if if you can or want to talk about some of the, challenges that brings to, how do you do that at a company that big? How do you, what is the role of UX, and how do you lead that? How many people are in your quote UX group?
Well, in my group, we've got about 160. We think there are about 300 total in the enterprise. As you said, it's a huge group. We're Fortune 5 or 6 or something now, $240 billion company. And so it's just huge. And we're not exactly centralized. We're sort of quasi-centralized. And so I'm on the technology side. But we have various pockets of other user experience groups. Sometimes they kind of pop up, whack-a-mole like within the technology organization, right? And so it's the whole idea of like frenemies, you know what I mean? You've got these weird relationships where the other groups that pop up are they're both, because we have a services model. We bill for our time, right? I run an agency basically, and so these other groups end up basically being clients and competitors simultaneously, right? And some are in different parts of the organization, and some are firewalled for various reasons. But we're the largest by, I don't know, by some exponential factor, and so as a result, we carry a lot of the kind of enterprise functions as a center of excellence, while there are other staff that do UX work across the company. And so we kind of lead a community of practice. There are some things that we do on an exclusive basis for the enterprise. So, for example, one of our functions or lines of business that we have is accessibility. We've got a large accessibility group, about 40 people. And so, we provide a number of enterprise functions. We have a a UI framework that we create, which is both a design system and a component library. And there are a number of products that run on top of that. And that goes back to, some work we did way back in the day together with my fascination for UI patterns, right? I've had an opportunity for that to really come to fruition in my professional life, even after studying it for years and dealing with it academically. So it's an interesting environment to work in, because it is basically a marketplace, right? It's kind of it's a marketplace of sorts within the enterprise, and we have clients, and we have effectively the function of sales and marketing and operations, which we've taken some of the, from the Rosenfeld book, the Design Ops, some of those concepts into our operations. And so we fully support this self-contained design group. And we are cross-functional. So I've got a cadre of designers. We've got a small dedicated user research team that does most of the quantitative research. We, prior to COVID, were in the facilities business. We've got gorgeous usability testing facilities in Minneapolis and Boston. They're closed now due to the pandemic, but we were doing quite a bit of lab work for a period of time. We've got the accessibility group, as I mentioned. We've got the UI frameworks. We're sort of involved in all the things that you could possibly be involved in from a UX standpoint. So from that perspective, it's really interesting, and it's I'm just delighted to have the opportunity. I feel very blessed to have the opportunity to lead the group and to be involved in all of those things, because there's never a dull moment, for sure. And just the industry that we work in. I mean, obviously it goes without saying, I suppose, but healthcare itself is vitally important, and it's a mission-driven enterprise trying to make the health system work better for everyone. And in a digital economy, obviously, user experience, HCI, human factors, however you want to think of this, it's really a very important consideration for doing that. And so, it's been a great run. I've been there for 9 years. I built the practice when they hired me 9 years ago. I was the first UXer, if you will, in the company.
That's kind of crazy.
It is crazy. Yeah, my boss and I talk about that all the time, because I was actually his first hire. And when they brought me in, they said, your mission is to figure out what the appetite is for user experience and build a team to support it. And so 9 years later, 160 people and some splinter groups, so we've had some people leave our group and start teams within the enterprise, and they're sort of adjunct and affiliated now. So it's been great. It's been a good run. It's not without its challenges. I would say that one of the things that is interesting about that career progression is, at a certain point in that progression, my job basically ended up having nothing to do with user experience or HCI, which is part of the reason that I teach, because it really does become a matter of running a business. I have all the HR things and budget things and communication things and all of those things to deal with. And the most fun part of my week is whenever I get to go to a design review and do a design critique and participate in that, or I get an opportunity to look at a research plan or some research results and kind of dig into those things. And I really look forward to those. You
don't get to do that as often now as you used to, no. I would think.
No, I kind of actually look for excuses to do that sort of.
See, this is what happens when you're successful. Then you don't get to do the work you like to do sometimes, right?
Well, that's exactly it. And, you end up out of need having to deal more with the business end of things, which has been good. I mean,
yeah,
I've got a business degree, and I had my own firm for a few years, very much a small scale kind of thing. But there's a lot that I like about that aspect of it. But for me, I am most intellectually interested in and intellectually curious, frankly, in kind of the theoretical aspects of HCI, although all the practice and methods are interesting too. But those haven't changed a whole lot over the years. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So if you could wave a magic wand and get to do something, introduce a new idea into the organization, or you know I don't know, hire different people, or I mean just anything. If someone would say, Dean, what is it you really want to do that's new or different here at United Health Group? Like what would you say? Do you have any idea?
I think it is. I'd like to get to a level of maturity. It's not just at our company. You see this in the industry. I'd like us to get to a level of maturity where we could do the advanced stuff.
All right.
Right.
What counts as the advanced step?
Well, I think it's a matter of, from a design perspective, it's a lot of kind of basic blocking and tackling and just trying to get that into the product development ecosystem, right? So, for example, if you go back to the process discussion, we don't get to do all the things, right? And why don't we get to do all the things? Because we live in the real world where there are resource constraints and budget constraints, and you can't get the right staffing, and the project timeline.
Yeah.
Absolutely, all of those things. So the magic wand would be you get to do all those things so that you could get the best outcomes that you want to get. That would be one thing. But then even in the course of doing those things, if you think of that as kind of the breadth of things that one could do from a UX method perspective, then the depth in each one of those. So, for example, take the kind of the classical usability testing, the extent to which you're using lightweight methods versus, for example, right, or having traction theory, having practitioners who are employing some of those concepts. You don't get to do a lot of that, and so you see the results in that across the industry, right? Like we've had this conversation before. Design theater, when you're thinking about design and you're trying to come up with bad examples, there's no shortage, right? Like, give me an example of something that you found difficult to use or frustrating or whatever. Anybody you talk to, either in the field or a layperson or whatever, can come up with a dozen examples of those. Now, great. Give me a good example of design, right? There are very few of those. They're hard to come up with, and I think it speaks to the lack of maturity in the industry across the board.
Yeah.
Well, so one of the things that I think I've noticed, just generally, and maybe it's a follow-up question, is I do think that a lot of the companies that we work with, they are so constrained. They're just infinitely constrained. They never have enough developers. They don't have enough development time. And what they really don't have is they don't have enough UXers doing. I forget the phrase that I used, but it was sort of just like the rolling up your sleeves, basic, like just the basic level building blocks. Maybe like the UX grunt work would maybe be like another way to say it. Mm-hmm. And there just seems to be this enormous, impossible, like just the amount of that kind of work that is out there seems impossible and never ending in most of the companies that we've talked to. And one of the problems that we really face is sometimes they have like really smart, really talented people, and the organization is like, hey, we need you to do really simple stuff because that's like the stuff we need to get out of the door. And so a lot of like the fun higher level projects and initiatives and all that stuff, they never get to it. And by the time you would even get close to thinking about getting to it, the next project is already behind. So I mean, I am seeing that in like every single organization, and I'm not sure that it's ever going to stop. So I don't know if you have different thoughts about how the get off the roller coaster.
Well, I don't know how to get off the roller coaster. I think you're right, and I think it's a universal. And I would make two comments about it. One is I think that there's a talent challenge, right? I was going to call it a problem. It's not really a problem. It's just there's so much work that you can't get enough high grade talent. You can't get enough talent, right? So it's hard enough to hire to fill roles. But if you think about the quality of talent, then it becomes even harder, right? So there's this great article. I should try and dig it out. It was, I think the title was something like God Bless the C Players. And it was a Harvard Business Review article from forever ago. And it talked about sort of the value of needing various grades of players. You can't always have an all-star team. And like the organization that I run, we've got a bunch of amazing people, but we've got pretty good scale.
And I think, and it's also interesting. It's so when the Twin Cities, especially, we've done various sort of workshops and keynotes with different UXPA organizations or other sort of professional organizations. And one of the things I've definitely found about the Twin Cities in particular is that there are a lot of I mean it's not just it's not like insulting or anything. There's a lot of like people from like the Bemidji states of the world. It's not all like Harvard and Stanford.
Okay, wait. We have to back up a little because first of all, some of the people listening are not from the United States, so they may not know Twin Cities. So Twin Cities refers to Minneapolis, St. Paul, two cities right next to each other in the state of Minnesota.
Yes.
Okay, and then your Bemidji comment.
Okay. We'll redo it. I'll take it out.
No, you don't have to. I just think you need to explain what Bemidji, what that means.
Bemidji is a wonderful city that I cannot spell.
Yeah, absolutely.
It is in northern Minnesota.
Yeah. It's just not a big urban area. So if you're from Bemidji, it's not part of this huge urban area where there's going to be a lot of UX people who are coming out of master's degrees like, Carnegie Mellon or Georgia, right? That's what you meant.
But okay, so that brings up a great point though, because without naming places, which you may have already mentioned,
and getting in trouble with more people as we go along.
Well, because I had this conversation because we have an internship program basically, and I sort of didn't make any friends by giving a professional opinion about what we're seeing of people coming out of schools. I would submit that by and large, the people that come out of school they're not ready. They're not ready to be in professional situations. And I guess
wait, when you say come out of school, are you talking about undergraduate or master's level or what?
Both. I mean, there are master's programs. We've had some really good hires recently, for example, out of the Purdue program.
Yeah.
And maybe the UX programs are more practical, right, than some of the general human factors programs, for example. But it's been a challenge, and part of it is it gets back to one of the key issues with maturity in the industry. I think there's another great book. It's UX Team of One, if you remember that one.
Leah Bewley.
There you go. And I think that really represents probably the majority of what goes on in our field, right? And so, you think about the choreography or the mechanics of how a project works. You have some poor student who comes out of undergrad, they get a job, and then, let's say generally they don't work in a super large team like I have. They might work in a 10 or 15 person team, and often they're going to get thrown into a project where they're the only one doing the UX work, and based on what experience and with what support. And so it's really challenging. And I think that the schools from a professional training perspective don't do enough to prepare and I'm thinking designers particularly, I've had better success on the research side, but they don't do enough to prepare students for practical design work. It's like you come in and they say, well, my senior thesis was all about VR, whatever, kind of really cool stuff. And it's like, great, we've got 3 sprints to create all these wireframes and ship, right? It's a different kind of process. It's, I don't know, real world kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So
I think it does depend on the school, and it does depend on the classes. And unfortunately, because Dean, I think and I think maybe we've mentioned on our podcast before, I'm an adjunct professor also at one of the University of Wisconsin campuses.
Not in Bemidji.
Not in Bemidji. Bemidji is not in Wisconsin, Dean.
No, I know.
You know that. Anyway, I teach usually a course a semester, and it kind of depends on who's teaching, and I think, I don't know, I see I know the courses that the students are taking. It's hard for them to get enough, even if that's their major. It's hard for them to get enough courses in their major.
Well, for sure. Well, and how much can you teach in a given semester?
I can teach a lot.
Of course you can. Yes, absolutely.
I would say that, when I was coming out of law school, I heard the exact same thing, that the kids who were coming out of law school were not ready. They did not have the practical experience needed to hit the ground and be doing if you get out of law school and you start working for some nonprofit somewhere, here you go. Here's 10 cases. Good luck. And these are kids who, okay, you did a little internship where you wrote some fancy papers for a law journal, but actually being in the corporate world, handling, being on a team and what your expectations are, that stuff. It's interesting because I don't think that's a UX only thing, because I've been hearing the same stuff about law students for the last 5-6 years.
But I think I guess I have strong feelings about this because I teach, and I've had some wonderful, wonderful students. I mean, just amazing students over the years that I've been really impressed with, because University of Wisconsin, the campus I teach at, I don't teach in Madison at the main campus. I'm teaching at one of the other campuses, and it's not a top 10 school in the nation or anything. I've been really impressed with the students, with how smart they are, how hard they work, how quickly they learn. And I understand what you guys are saying. I do, but I'm a real advocate. I wish more companies. And I know it's a lot. It's a huge investment of time, and it comes with it a lot of risk. And maybe, if you put in a lot of time and energy and money into putting together a great onboarding, first year program, then then they're going to leave. There's that aspect. Okay, we trained them for 2 years and now they're out of here. I mean, there's all of that you got to worry about. But on the other hand, I just think there is a really, I'm going to make a plug for the undergraduate talent pool out there that really wants to get a job. And, in where I live in central Wisconsin, there's some companies here that have been taking the graduates from our the program I teach at for dozens of years, and they've put together a whole training program, and a lot of times the students stay, and it's been a win-win for everybody. But I know it takes a lot of work.
And I think that's the problem, is that because every organization is just so resource strapped, Like they're all so behind. Like the one thing that I think, I could be wrong, is the idea that, okay, we have a new hire, we're going to take a bunch of people and let's slow them down to help train this new hire and like just do baby steps, and we're going to, like they need like bodies in the factory.
You know why I think it happens around here maybe more than other places? This is central Wisconsin. If you don't take those graduates and train them, you have no one. Okay, no one.
Yeah.
There are very few people who are willing to pick up and move to the frozen wasteland that is central Wisconsin, where it's minus 20 degrees and it's, a small town in a rural area. I mean, you may have a shot, Dean, at recruiting and getting people. I know Minneapolis is as cold as it is here, but at least it's a city, and it's really hard. It's really hard to get experienced people here. So I think they are more willing, because otherwise they have no one. That's my guess.
Susan, what you touched on about corporate training programs, that we have in our company of recent graduates that go through various rotations, and we're just now starting to develop some partnerships where we're recruiting specifically from design-related programs. So I think that's going to be very beneficial. But we also have a corporate university, and that corporate university has various colleges, one of which is one that we run called the College of Experience Design. And so you mentioned earlier, like we've been working together forever in various ways. I don't know, 2 years ago, something like that, I think we licensed some courseware from you when we started this program, right? And it was basically the UCD process. And so we use that, and that's part of our core training. We've recently done something similar with Mark Stickdorn for service design, as we've started to roll out service design as a methodology as well. And so I think that one of the necessary components of success for talent is talent development, and having these kinds of corporate training programs. We've been very bullish on training. We have a professional development program that we run, where we run everyone through soft skills training and through technical training. And we do invest pretty heavily in that. And that's a big deal. And that's one of the ways that you get the outcomes. I don't believe students are quite ready for prime time when they come out of school, but one of the ways that you can get them ready is through this. But then for every hiring opportunity you have, the second point I would make is that it's really challenging for hiring managers, because what do you do when you have one position to hire for, and you can either hire somebody right out of school, or you hire somebody with 3 to 5 years of experience, roughly the same salary. You'll see some differences in salary, but even if you invest a little more in salary, you get more out of that. It's hard to be the one to take the hit for that person getting their first job.
I know what one last thought about all these points. Just because of the raw need, I know a number of organizations we work with. Some of their sort of, I don't want to say best and brightest, but people who have really fit in well and have sort of hit the ground running have been people who were in a different role in the company. And, maybe they were, project manager or something, or they were a developer, or they were in, business strategy, sales, or marketing. And they're like, oh, UX, this is kind of cool. And they, so then they kind of get some basic training and they transfer over. And those seem to be the people that, better than the new hires usually, that really seem to fit, because they have all the soft skills, they understand the industry, they understand how to navigate stuff, they maybe bring in some expertise in some areas that maybe, a different designer might not have. And they don't realize how slow or fast things are supposed to go. So they just sort of fit right in to whatever the org is trying to do. So I think a lot of companies have had success with that. And yeah, obviously that internal training has been, I think, really important.
Well, it's funny you say that. The one of the first I guess really serious jobs that I had was at a company called CompuWare, which was a major player back in the day in the computer industry and in their professional services division, which was the consulting group that I was in. Susan, that's where I was working when we first
I
started
know,
working together.
I remember.
It was way back in the day. They had these resource managers that one of the things they would say is that they always recruited on the basis of soft skills, and the position being, we can teach you how to code or whatever. We're not in the business of teaching you how to communicate or how to deal with people or whatnot. And so that technical training is where it becomes really viable. And I'll tell you one place where we've had tremendous success with that is in our accessibility program. That's a really hard hire. It's hard to do accessibility work at scale. There's just not enough people in the industry with experience or even knowledge to do accessibility work. And so we have a thing that we call our Grow Your Own program, where we have a pretty robust training program to create accessibility specialists who come from, development backgrounds and product manager backgrounds and UX backgrounds and whatever other background. And it's been very successful. But that's taking people who have those skills, as you said, and the corporate acumen, and teaching them very specific technical skills.
Okay, I'm going to switch topics.
Where are we going?
Go for
Is
it.
that all right?
Where are we going now?
Yeah.
Well,
Let's do it.
you mentioned Leah Bewley's book, UX Team of One, which is one of my favorite books in the field of UX. So I would like, and I didn't tell you I was going to ask you this question, and I hate it when people ask me these questions. So now I get to do it to you. But what are some of your favorite, quote, old books and some of your favorite new books?
Wow, that's a great question. Favorite old books. Okay. You got to give me a second to think about some of this here. There was one that I particularly loved, and I'm spacing out on the author's name. I have to think about it.
What was it about?
It was Designing Visual Interfaces, Kevin Mullett, and I forget the other guy.
Kevin Mullett. Wow.
Do you remember
that was
him?
an old one. I do remember that. Here, I'm going to look it up. I'm going to look it up while we're talking. Let's see if it's, wow. That's an oldie but goodie.
Yeah, Designing Visual Interfaces, Kevin Mullett, and I can't remember the other author's name, but it was just a great
Daryl
Sano.
Sano.
Sano, that was the other guy.
Yeah.
I would assume it's out of print. Maybe it's not out of print.
Oh, it's got to be out of print. It goes all the way back. Here, I'm looking it up. It goes back to 1994.
Okay, well, that's a pretty modern book as far as I'm concerned.
But you can buy it used.
Yeah, well, that's what I tell people about our book. It's funny. So let's come back to your book question. Maybe I'll get up and go to my bookcase and see if I can find something fun. But that's what I tell people about our speech book. There were 2 chapters in that book that really transcended speech interfaces. One was
they
the
didn't have
process
to
chapter.
do with speech interfaces. Yeah.
Yeah, one was the process chapter, right?
Yeah.
And the process chapter was basically a version of Interface 5 that we mentioned earlier. And then the other, which is actually, if you Google it, we've gotten tons of press on this, the heuristics.
I know. People love the heuristics.
And I don't know that we've ever captured the story, but I'll tell my version of it, and then let's come back to books. So we were talking about the principles that would be kind of first principles for design that you could use for purposes of evaluation and designing interfaces. And the theory being that there are some basic human-centered principles that transcended whether it was visual or speech interfaces or whatnot. And so we looked at kind of the usual suspects, Nielsen's heuristics and whatnot, and didn't feel that they were complete, Schneiderman, I think. So we did a little mini research project. You had this gorgeous office at the firehouse or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And this huge library. And we went through the whole bloody thing, and we went through dozens of books all the, the Apple Human Interfaces guidelines,
And
the
we put these
Microsoft
on
Windows guidelines.
cards.
We did a card sort. We did a ginormous card sort.
I remember this.
And then we grouped them, and then we sort of normalized and rationalized the language. And we came up with 19, but we felt like we had to figure out a 20th. So
yeah. 19 was just too weird.
Yeah, you couldn't say the top 19 things. And I remember one of the things that I was, particular about was parallel construction.
Yeah,
because that's something that drives me nuts. About
this is
some
a
of these
very
other things.
Dean Barker thing. Yes.
Right. Well, you've got a set of things that you're going to treat as rules, and some of them are arbitrarily framed as positive and some as negative. That makes me nuts. So we were very particular in the consistency for the way we formed them. And I think it was a great set of heuristics. I've trained my team. We actually use that for our heuristic evaluations.
Yeah, it is funny. It does. I mean, I see that pop up on LinkedIn, and people tweet about the Weinschenk Barker heuristics.
There you go.
And I think that's fun. Yeah, and I do want to. I mean, I have both happy and frustrating memories of you and I sitting in what was a beautiful office, which, I subsequently sold that building, so I don't have it anymore. But, and we would just argue whether it was about the heuristics, and the other thing was about when we were putting together the UCD methodology interface 5. Oh
yes.
my gosh, we almost came to blows about whether this particular point of the process belonged to this phase or the other phase.
Right.
I remember that. But it was, it was good work. And I think, and we were really getting deep into it. And I feel like we were really blessed with the opportunity to take the time to work on that in a way that we felt was comprehensive. Because I think so often you don't, because of the things we were talking about with time constraints and budget constraints, and, if you're doing work for a client and all of that, and even just if you have your own business, you don't always take the time to dig in and explore and give it the time and attention that you think it should. And I do remember the work that you and I did together as being, one of those wonderful moments in time when you kind of dig in. But we didn't always agree, Dean. I got to say, we didn't always agree. All right. Any other old books that you want to mention? Anything else come to mind?
Well, for sure. And I'll just say on that topic and how important it is for people to take the time to do those sorts of things every now and then, which is one of the reasons that I really am bullish on grad school, and I push my senior staff who want to be leaders into grad school, is that you need to go deep sometimes, right? That's hugely important for the industry, for your own intellectual growth. Is it Cal Newport, the book Deep Work? I think that's it, Newport. Anyway, you need to engage in deep work, and you're right, we were blessed to do that. So I'm always grateful for those opportunities. Old books. So the Mullet and Sano book, that was just, I love that because it was very practical. It had sort of key ideas for design, like perception, alignment, repetition, contrast, those sorts of like first principles as a designer. And it was a slim volume.
Yeah.
I really liked that book. Some of the, classic stuff that I came up with maybe was of a time, but Nielsen's usability engineering methods, the inspections method book, I think were good. On the HCI front, we had this conversation before, the textbook conversation, right? But that's brutal. I think probably the best sort of one semester HCI textbook is still the Jenny Priest book, Human Computer Interaction, but that's long out of print, and there's not a good one that's really, I think, come up and taken its place.
Okay, next question, probably last question.
All right.
Wait, before we started recording, you said, ask me about Harry Potter.
Oh, the Harry Potter thing. Yeah, well, it's related to your question about old books. There's
Okay.
this great quote in one of the Harry Potter films where Voldemort says it was old magic and I was foolish to forget it, or something like that. I'm paraphrasing. But one of the things that strikes me is that there's a lot of, if you will, old magic in our field, meaning concepts, techniques, methods that have practically gotten lost. Like nobody talks about them anymore. Nobody's doing them anymore. And I think
Give me an
to our
example of
detriment.
one.
Well, I'll give you an example that cuts across functions beyond UX, and that's the notion of analysis, right? So, for example, you used to have in a waterfall world, which I know is a dirty word for most people, but you had a process flow of requirements, analysis, design, build, test, right? And in an agile world, which it squarely is now, you have a means of requirements, which are user stories typically, right? And you don't have any place for design, but that's where we come in. We come in and we kind of figure that out in various ways. And of course, building is still alive and well because it's a developer, by developers for developers kind of process. But nowhere in that is there a proper place for what we used to think of as analysis, which is where the deep work of system development happened, right?
Yeah.
That's where the deep work happened. And so you get requirements, you get kind of a half-baked version of design, you get plenty of build. Testing is very robust and mature. Testing methods have gotten way better in the industry in modern times, but there's not deep analysis. And directly related to that, think of our old methodologies from a UCD standpoint, is the notion, for example, of high-level design, which I would liken to architecture. It's analogous to architecture from a software standpoint. Again, there's not a place for that in those methods, in the modern methods, and nobody's doing it. Directly related to that, you've got ideas like object-oriented interface design, which to me was the secret sauce of good conceptual design.
Yep.
That method's gotten lost.
Well, not totally lost. I'm still working with it. I'm still teaching it.
Preach.
It's just so interesting because, this came up for me today. Actually came up today working with a client. And, I'm doing this special work with the client, and all my years of expertise. And, what have they have this aha moment where they realize, oh my gosh, we're missing this, and what's this? It's exactly what you're talking about. It's like and I remember thinking, this is great, that the big insight and the big way I can help them today is to talk to them about why they need to be doing task analysis and
Right.
object-oriented conceptual model design. It's like, okay, yeah, it's kind of like your Harry Potter thing, right? This is the magic we don't want to forget about. But just because it's been around for a long time doesn't mean it's not relevant, right? These are
No, but I think people, everybody likes the shiny object. Everybody likes the new thing.
You're right. And these things are not particularly exciting. And sometimes, if you're I think the object-oriented, analysis is complicated and special. Task analysis is like not shiny,
Right.
But it's, so I understand what you're saying, but it's critical. It's like, hey, we know how to do this. This work, this UX work, or at least, let's just talk about the analysis piece that you mentioned. It's been going on for decades. We know how to do it. I'm sure you could come up with improvements, but let's just make sure we do it.
Well, and another thing we should do is stop using new words for things, right? Like, you mentioned books like the book on mental models, which is not mental models, it's a different thing, right?
Indy and I had that argument a little bit.
Yeah. Well, it's a wonderful book. It
is. But I don't. And I told her, I said, that's by Indy Young, and a very popular book. And I said, Indy, one day we're going to have to really argue about the term, because it's a great book, but that's not what I would call it. But yes.
Right, exactly. But so for example, task analysis, which is another critical thing that has all but gotten lost. There's more of that than there is the OO stuff. But at a higher level, you hear in systems engineering workflow analysis, right?
Yes.
And you go all the way back to old time and motion studies, right? There's a rich history in human factors of that stuff. And then now everybody wants to do journey maps. Well, okay, so all of this stuff at a level of abstraction is really exactly the same thing. And you keep changing the language and it's not going to be sticky. Frankly, it's the same way that in the industry, we feel some need to change the label for what we do every decade or so.
Yeah.
I don't think that helps.
Yeah, I'm with you. But you know what? These are words of people who are old and decrepit. To complain about how no one remembers the good old days.
Get off my lawn, right?
So I apologize to those of you listening who are rolling your eyes and saying, oh man, would these guys stop talking about the 1990s? But Dean, so much fun to have you on our podcast. Thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure.
I am very, very much looking forward to seeing you again in person. I know it will happen. I have faith that we will be together once again in person, and I look forward to that very much.
Me too. It's always a pleasure. I love you to death. Guthrie, thank you for setting this up.
Yeah.
And happy to talk anytime.
Wonderful.
All right.
Thanks all. Bye.